Welcome to Living Beyond the Invisible, a walk with Heather. I'm Heather Perrin, and this is the space where we will pull back the curtain on life with invisible disabilities. Each week, we'll explore the realities of chronic illness, the challenges that often go unseen, and the strength it takes to keep moving forward. Whether you're living with an invisible disability yourself, supporting someone who is, or just wanting to understand more, you're in the right place. Let's take this walk together. All right, before we get started, I just want to apologize. My brain is all over the place. My ADHD is flaring and my meds are not helping. So just be prepared for my brain to flub this episode. This may be a warning that happens at the beginning of all episodes going forward because my brain is crazy. Okay, thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. There's a certain look you get sometimes when you've been to the doctor's office one too many times. It's not always overt. Sometimes it's a pause that lasts just a little too long, a sigh before the next question, or a flicker of something in their expression that says, "Here we go again." For people living with invisible disabilities, this experience is far too familiar. The truth is, the more we advocate for ourselves, the more we push for answers, clarity, or treatment that makes sense for us. But it's also the more we risk being labeled as difficult. That word, difficult, it carries a heavy weight in healthcare settings. It can mean non-compliant, demanding, overly emotional, or even aggressive. And yet, for many of us, what's being called difficult is really just being persistent. It's asking questions. It's wanting to be heard. It's needing someone to take our pain seriously. So today, we're going to unpack what it means to be called a difficult patient and how easily the line between advocacy and perceived aggression can blur when you're living with a condition that people can't see. Let's be honest. Invisible disabilities require us to become our own experts. We learn to track symptoms, research meds, understand lab results, and navigate insurance systems that really weren't built with us in mind. We spend hours on hold explaining our conditions to new doctors, rehashing years of history, and fighting for accommodations that really should be standard. It's exhausting. But when we bring all that knowledge into an exam room, when we start speaking up with authority about our own bodies, it can become uncomfortable for some providers who are used to being the only experts in the room. And this is where the tension begins. It's a strange position to be in, knowing that your health depends on collaboration, but that speaking too assertively might mean being labeled as hostile. For many of us, that fear shapes the way we communicate. We overthink every single word, trying to sound calm, polite, and deferential, even when we're in pain or scared. We soften our tone so we won't seem rude. We apologize for taking up space. We say things like, "I'm sorry to bother you, but," or "I know you're really busy, but," just to make our questions sound nicer. Meanwhile, we're sitting in that chair trying to condense years of suffering into a 15-minute appointment slot, hoping that this time, maybe, just maybe, someone will actually listen to us. And when they don't, when we're dismissed or brushed off, that's when frustration builds. That's when we push back. We ask for a second opinion. We question their plan. We point out inconsistencies or missed details. We show up prepared, and we refuse to be silenced. And then suddenly, we're no longer advocates. We're non-compliant. We're aggressive. We're difficult. This dynamic is not just frustrating, it's dangerous as well. Because when patients are labeled as difficult, it can impact the care they receive. Studies have shown that clinicians tend to spend less time with patients they perceive as challenging. They may also subconsciously downplay symptoms or hesitate to prescribe needed medications. And this isn't just about attitude, it's about outcomes as well. For those of us with invisible disabilities, that bias can mean years of untreated pain, delayed diagnosis, or worsening conditions that could have been managed and treated earlier. It's important to say this clearly. Wanting competent, compassionate, and thorough medical care does not make anyone difficult. It makes them human. And honestly, it's something we should all be receiving anyway. But there's something deeper happening here, too. Something about power. The medical system, for all its advancements, still operates on a hierarchy. The doctor speaks. The patient listens. When that order is disrupted, when a patient shows up educated, informed, and determined to participate, it can challenge that balance. Some providers embrace it, others resist it. And the ones who resist it often do so by reasserting that control, by reasserting that authority, sometimes subtly, most times not at all. That's when we hear words like non-compliant, resistant, or emotional appear in our charts. They may sound clinical, but those words carry a lot of judgment. They can follow a patient from provider to provider, quietly shaping how future doctors perceive them before they even walk in the door. Imagine trying to advocate for yourself while knowing your medical record already paints you as a problem. It's no wonder so many people with chronic or invisible illnesses start to lose faith in the system altogether. So what does advocacy look like when you're navigating that kind of landscape? Well, advocacy isn't aggression, though it's often mistaken for it. Advocacy is asking for what you need. It's bringing your records, writing down your questions, speaking clearly, and insisting on answers. It's saying, I'm not comfortable with that treatment plan. It's asking, can you explain why this test isn't necessary? It's not shouting or being disrespectful. It's being engaged in your own care. But the challenge lies in tone and perception. For instance, a man who speaks firmly might be seen as confident. A woman who speaks in the same tone might be called abrasive. And when you add disability to the equation, particularly an invisible one, that bias only multiplies. Many of us have had to become experts in emotional regulation because showing any frustration can instantly shift how we're treated. It's a delicate dance, balancing calmness with conviction, clarity with compassion, and truth with diplomacy. But it shouldn't have to be. We shouldn't have to shrink ourselves or sugarcoat our pain just to be heard. And yet, for many people, that's exactly what it takes to get through a medical appointment without being labeled. Part of the reason this dynamic persists is because invisible disabilities don't fit the traditional mold of illness. We don't always look sick. Our symptoms fluctuate. Some days we can push through. Other days we can't get out of bed. That inconsistency confuses providers who rely on visible signs to validate suffering. When they can't see it, some assume it's exaggerated or psychological. And that's when the gaslighting starts, when legitimate medical concerns are dismissed as anxiety, depression, or attention seeking. We talked about medical gaslighting a few weeks ago. And over time, those experiences teach us to advocate louder, to come prepared with data and documentation. And ironically, that preparedness, too, can be seen as a sign of mistrust or confrontation. It's a cycle that keeps reinforcing itself, and it feels never ending. But let's stop and consider something for just a moment. What if the system itself taught providers that self-advocacy is a form of respect, not rebellion? What if speaking up wasn't seen as challenging authority, but as participating in care? Because at its best, that's exactly what healthcare should be, a partnership between equals. Unfortunately, too many people living with invisible illnesses have learned the hard way that being quiet gets them ignored and speaking up gets them judged. So where does that leave us? I think it starts with redefining what advocacy actually means for us. Advocacy doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like preparation. Walking into an appointment with a written summary of your history and goals for the visit. Sometimes it looks like bringing someone with you for support, someone who can take notes or speak up when you feel dismissed. Sometimes it's asking for your chart notes afterward so you can make sure your symptoms were documented accurately. It's also about self-awareness, understanding that frustration is valid, but channeling it into clarity. Saying, I understand that you're busy, but my symptoms are getting worse and I need this to be taken seriously. That's calm, that's assertive, that's advocacy. And when all else fails, sometimes advocacy means walking away, finding a provider who listens, who sees you as a partner rather than a problem. It's okay to switch doctors. It's okay to say, this isn't working for me. That's not being difficult, my friends. That's setting a healthy boundary. And healthy boundaries are a powerful form of advocacy. They protect your energy, your trust, and your mental health. They remind you that your worth isn't measured by how agreeable you are in the exam room. Still, many of us carry guilt for being labeled as hard to deal with. We replay conversations in our heads after appointments, wondering if we were too direct, too emotional, too much. That self-doubt can linger for years. But here's the truth. You can't control someone else's perception of your tone when their bias already defines it. What you can control is your commitment to your own well-being and health. If you've ever been labeled as a difficult patient, I want you to know you're not alone. And you are not difficult. You are someone navigating a system that wasn't built to see you, and yet you keep showing up anyway. That is strength. That is resilience. I myself have been defined as difficult just because I've advocated for myself. And honestly, I don't care. I'm going to keep advocating for myself. You should too. Now let's talk about how the label difficult often intersects with identity. Studies have shown that women, people of color, and those with disabilities are more likely to be dismissed or disbelieved in medical settings. So when a woman with chronic pain insists on further testing, she's often told she's being dramatic. When a person of color speaks firmly about their symptoms, they're labeled aggressive. And when someone with an invisible disability tries to explain their needs, they're accused of being non-compliant. These stereotypes don't exist in isolation. They shape who gets heard and who gets help and who gets harmed. I've talked about this a little bit. My current rheumatologist doesn't listen to me, which is why I'm going next month for a Actually, it is next month. Sorry, I had to look at my calendar. That is why I'm going for a second opinion to a different rheumatologist, because it may very well just be fibromyalgia that I have. But I do have symptoms that also coincide with lupus. And I keep getting the runaround. He tells me because I had chemo, he won't do the blood test to see if it is lupus because it'll throw a false positive, and he doesn't want to put me through other tests, which does not sit well with me because if I have lupus, this is something we need to figure out. But I just keep getting the same runaround. So I'm going for a second opinion. And again, it could just be fibromyalgia, but I would really like to know. And that is why advocacy is not just a personal act. It's a systemic necessity. Every time someone, like me, speaks up and demands better care, they're not just helping themselves. They're paving the way for others. It's how the system slowly changes, one conversation at a time. And that is the balance we have to find. Advocating for ourselves while still protecting our emotional energy. Because being consistently on guard, ready to defend our legitimacy, is exhausting. Oh my gosh, is it exhausting. It takes a toll not just on the body, but on the heart. We start to dread appointments. We avoid calling for refills. We internalize shame for needing help at all. But remember this, your worth isn't defined by how easy you are to manage. It's defined by your humanity, by the fact that you deserve care, compassion, and dignity. You don't owe anyone silence to make them comfortable. Please remember that. If anything, what the system needs is more difficult patients, more people who speak up, ask questions, and refuse to accept dismissal as normal. Change never happens through silence. It happens through persistence. And yes, persistence will be misunderstood. People will call it pushy. They'll call it stubborn. They might even call it aggressive. But that's okay, because what they're really seeing is courage. To anyone listening who's felt the sting of being labeled, I want you to hear this very, very clearly. You are not hard to help. You are asking to be treated with the same respect as anyone else, as you should be. That is not too much to ask. That's the bare minimum of what healthcare should be. And honestly, it should be way better. You don't have to apologize for knowing your body better than anyone else. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone. You have the right to ask, to question, to understand, and to be believed. And maybe the next time a provider encounters a patient who speaks up, they'll pause before labeling them as difficult and instead recognize them for what they are, someone who is just fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be believed. Because that's what this is really about, visibility. People with invisible disabilities are constantly fighting to make the unseen visible, to translate internal experiences into external understanding. Every appointment, every explanation, every repeat story is part of that battle. It takes bravery to keep showing up in a system that lets you down. It takes endurance to advocate again after being ignored. And it takes grace to do it with the hope that someday someone will finally listen. So if you've ever walked out of a doctor's office questioning your worth, questioning whether you were too assertive, too much, please remember the right provider will never make you feel small for speaking up. They'll thank you for helping them understand. Being difficult is not a flaw. It's a symptom of caring deeply about your own health in a world that sometimes refuses to care enough in return. And maybe that's what we all need to remember, that advocacy isn't aggression. It's love. It's love for the body that's carried us through pain. Love for the mind that keeps fighting even when it's tired. Love for the life we're still building despite everything. That kind of love will always look like strength to me, never difficulty. That is it for this week. Next week, we are going to revisit something that I visited last season, and that is When Friends Fade, Navigating Social Loss. I think it's really important to touch on this again. I've had some more thoughts on it, and so I would really like to share. It will not be a repeat of last episode. I promise it is completely different, but it is important. So I will talk to you guys next week. Love you. Thank you for joining me today on Living Beyond the Invisible, A Walk with Heather. If this episode resonated with you, remember, you're not alone on this journey. You can connect with me on Facebook and TikTok, where I share more encouragement, advocacy, and behind-the-scenes glimpses of life with invisible disabilities. And if you'd like to support the podcast and gain access to exclusive content, you can also join me on Patreon. All of those links are in the show notes. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself, and I'll see you next week.